The first gun wasn't invented for war. It wasn't even invented on purpose. It all began with a group of monks. They were desperately searching for immortality. They wanted to live forever. Instead, they made one catastrophic mistake. That single error changed history. It happened deep in the quiet mountains of 9th century China. A handful of Taoist alchemists spent their entire lives grinding different minerals together. They were chasing a single, powerful obsession. They wanted to create a magical elixir. They believed this potion could stop the human body from aging at all. It was a grand dream. They wanted to conquer death itself. These hopeful monks tested hundreds of strange combinations. Most of their mixtures did absolutely nothing. They were just useless piles of dust. A few combinations did something rather odd. They fizzed or changed colors, but one specific blend was different. It was made from very common ingredients. They used saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal. This simple mixture did something none of them ever expected. It did not grant eternal life. Instead, it exploded violently right in their hands. It was a sudden blast of heat. Nobody easily survives that kind of terrible mistake. You do not walk away without a wild story to tell your friends. Surviving accounts from that time describe very painful injuries. The poor alchemists suffered singed hands and badly burned faces. The blast was incredibly intense. At least one alchemist's own house caught fire right around him. He had to run for his life. The experiment was a total disaster. They had definitely not found immortality. They had actually found something else entirely. Not one of them understood what it was yet. They were completely in the dark. They decided to call it Ho Yao. In English, that translates directly to fire medicine. It is a very strange name. That ancient name still carries a quiet embarrassment. It reveals the true origin of the substance. It was born as a failed potion. It was not meant to be a future weapon. It was just a big mistake. Yet, that one accidental hand-burning error would change the world forever. This accident became one of the most consequential discoveries ever made. It changed the history of human conflict completely. It was the tiny seed of destruction. Every single musket on Earth grew from this moment. Every massive cannon and every modern gun started right here in this mountain laboratory. So, how did these peaceful monks do it? How did people looking for eternal life invent the gun? The strange answer runs through bamboo tubes. These tubes were strapped to ordinary spears. It also involves a major siege. That battle proved the new technology actually worked on real enemies. The story covers centuries of quiet, hard-won mechanical refinement. These clever upgrades would eventually decide the ultimate fate of massive empires. Let us start with the basic chemistry first. Understanding the science explains everything that follows. It makes the rest of the story make perfect sense. Over time, different experimenters refined the explosive mixture. They created a very specific ratio. It was roughly 75% saltpeter. They added 15% charcoal. Finally, they mixed in 10% sulfur. This exact formula became the standard black powder. It was used all over the world. The saltpeter acts as a powerful oxidizer. It releases fresh oxygen very rapidly when it gets heated up. This process feeds an extremely fast combustion reaction. It is like throwing gasoline on a fire. The chemical reaction produces a sudden, violent expansion of hot gas. That is the secret. That rapidly expanding gas is the entire secret of the invention. It is behind everything gunpowder would ever be used for. It did not matter what people made. It worked for a colorful firework bursting over a festival crowd. It also worked for a heavy lead ball punching through steel armor. In its earliest years, gunpowder was not weaponized at all. Nobody used it to fight wars. Instead, it showed up in beautiful fireworks. People also used it in smoke signals. It was popular at temple festivals. It was exactly the kind of decorative spectacle you would expect. The substance was discovered by monks chasing eternal life. It was not found by military engineers chasing a battlefield advantage. For several generations, ordinary people across China knew this powder well. They only saw it as noise and bright color in the night sky. It was nothing more. That peaceful view changed rather quickly. Military commanders during the Song dynasty saw what the substance could actually do. They realized it had real power. Between the 10th and 12th centuries, things shifted. Chinese engineers developed the Huochang. This name means the fire lance. It was a fearsome tool. The design of the fire lance was about as simple as a weapon could be. You just had to take a long length of bamboo. Then you strapped it tightly to the end of a regular spear. Next, you packed the hollow tube with gunpowder. Finally, you lit it during close combat. The final result was a fearsome pole weapon. It spewed bright flame directly at anyone within arm's reach. This turned an ordinary spear into something far more terrifying to face. It was shocking. It looked quite primitive at first. It seemed like little more than a burning stick on a pole. But hidden inside that simple bamboo tube was a massive idea. It was the exact concept that would eventually bring down great castles. It would defeat brave knights and destroy entire empires. Fire lances saw real combat use during Chinese sieges in the 1100s. They were tested in battle. By every surviving account, these weapons worked exactly as intended. They scorched and disoriented the terrified attackers. These soldiers had trained their whole lives to fight sharp blades. They did not know how to fight fire. The sudden noise and smoke threw the enemy into total chaos. Gunpowder had finally proven itself in actual combat. After that, technical innovation moved very fast. Each new step followed logically from the one right before it. Makers began packing pottery shards into the tubes. They also added small metal pellets alongside the black powder. This changed the weapon. This extra step turned a weapon that just produced flame into something else. It was now a device that flung dangerous projectiles outward with real force. This was the conceptual leap that mattered most of all. It shifted the weapon's main purpose away from simple intimidation. The new goal was to cause actual penetrating injury. This damage could now be delivered from a safe distance. It is the foundational idea behind every single firearm. Every gun that would ever follow used this concept. But the inventors ran into a major problem. The bamboo itself was failing. The natural bamboo simply could not survive the pressure. Stronger gunpowder charges caused the wood to split apart violently. This often injured the user's hands. It was too dangerous. Once Chinese metalworkers learned to cast bronze tubes, everything changed. These tubes were strong enough to contain the pressure safely. With bronze, the portable hand cannon was finally born. One of the oldest of these weapons still exists today. It was discovered in northern China. Experts dated it back to the year 1288. It is barely over a foot long. It is very light. A single soldier could easily carry this weapon on his back. It looks almost like a simple toy today, and yet that small bronze tube marks the true beginning of a revolution. It was a military revolution that would reshape the entire world. It changed how nations fought forever. By the 13th century, metal-barreled hand cannons were in regular use. Soldiers carried them across China. Engineers also scaled the same basic idea upward. They produced massive explosive devices. These new weapons were capable of cracking open heavily fortified positions. These places had once seemed completely unbreakable. The Mongols invaded China in the 1200s. They encountered these fiery weapons firsthand during some truly brutal sieges. The experience left a permanent mark on them. They were terrified but amazed. Rather than simply losing to the new technology, the clever Mongols absorbed it into their army. Once they controlled China, the Mongols changed their strategy. Their military campaigns carried gunpowder weaponry with them. They pushed westward across the vast lands of Asia. This is one of history's most underappreciated technology transfers. The Mongol conquests functioned almost like an accidental delivery system for science. They moved a Chinese invention across the width of Eurasia. They did this in just a handful of generations. It happened much faster than any normal trade caravan could have managed alone. From China, gunpowder technology spread outward along overlapping paths. It reached the Islamic world through trade. It also spread through military contact by the 13th century. It reached Europe not long after that. The explosive powder arrived alongside other major Chinese inventions. These items were making the exact same westward journey around those same centuries. Knowledge was flowing fast from east to west. These inventions included paper and printing. The magnetic compass was also part of this deep flow of knowledge. It all moved long before anyone had a word for globalization. Some modern historians note an interesting fact. Early European cannon design bears a very close structural resemblance to Chinese originals. The designs are so similar that direct transmission seems certain. It is far more likely than mere coincidence. Once gunpowder finally reached Europe in the late 13th century, it landed in a unique place. It entered a feudal military world. It would spend the next several centuries dismantling that world. Early European hand cannons were very crude tools. They were slow to load and incredibly difficult to aim properly. Essentially, each one was just a small cannon. It was awkwardly mounted on a wooden pole. A soldier had to load loose powder and a lead shot into the open end. Next, the soldier touched a smoldering ember to a small touch hole. He just hoped the resulting blast went somewhere useful. It was a guessing game. Crude as it was, the weapon carried enormous weight. It had both psychological and practical value. Traditional castle walls began to fail. These stone walls had withstood massive siege engines for many generations. Now, they were falling down due to heavy cannon fire. Mounted knights suffered too. They were the dominant military force in Europe for centuries. Suddenly, they found themselves completely vulnerable to this new weapon. The gun did not care how much expensive steel the knights were wearing. The bullet went right through it. The entire architecture of war changed with it. Cannons grew more powerful against tall stone walls. Because of this, the traditional castle became dangerously obsolete almost overnight. Military engineers had to respond quickly to this threat. They invented the star fort and the bastion. These were lower-angled structures. They were thickly reinforced with earth and stone. They were built specifically to deflect incoming cannon fire, rather than simply standing tall and hoping for the best. This was still just the beginning of the story. The weapon in a soldier's hands was about to change once again. This next big shift would decide how wars were fought. It would rule the battlefield for the next 200 years. The next real leap came in the late 15th century. This major upgrade was the matchlock mechanism. It was the development that finally turned gunpowder weapons into something new. They became the true backbone of organized infantry armies. Earlier hand cannons required two hands to operate. They required near impossible coordination from the soldier using them. A soldier needed one hand to steady the heavy weapon. He needed his other hand to apply fire to the touch hole. All of this happened while trying to aim at a moving target. It was too hard. The matchlock solved this big problem. It attached a slow-burning cord to a mechanical clamp. This clamp was built right onto the weapon itself. Pulling the trigger lowered the burning cord automatically. It dropped right into the priming powder. This simple action freed the shooter. Now he could actually aim with both hands. It was the first mechanical firing device ever applied to a small arm. The matchlock let a single trained soldier fire with real precision. This was possible for the first time in history. Here is a fact that is rarely mentioned in history books. For roughly the next 400 years, things were complicated. A skilled archer could often fire much faster than a gunman. In skilled hands, an archer was also more accurate than early firearms. Yet, armies adopted the gun anyway. They did not choose it because it outperformed the classic bow. They chose it because it took a fraction of the training time. It was a matter of simple math for the generals. A regular farmer could learn to load a matchlock in a few weeks. He could become a deadly soldier quickly. On the other hand, building a proficient longbowman took a long time. It took most of a lifetime of practice. That single trade-off changed everything. Less skill was now required for lethal force. This trade-off quietly changed the shape of every army that followed. By the early 1500s, matchlock weapons were spreading incredibly fast. They were adopted by the elite Ottoman janissaries. They were also refined into some of the finest firearms in the world by Japanese gunsmiths. This happened after Portuguese traders introduced the technology in the year 1543. Eventually, the technology was reabsorbed by China itself. They developed weapons meant to counter the same Mongol frontier. This was the same frontier that had once carried gunpowder westward in the first place. The matchlock was good, but it had one glaring weakness. It needed an open flame at all times to work. This made it completely useless in heavy rain. The glowing match was also a dangerous giveaway in total darkness. The clever wheel lock fixed that issue. It used a spinning, spark-throwing mechanism. However, the wheel lock was very expensive to make. It was far too complex for ordinary soldiers. The real breakthrough was the flintlock. This was developed between 1610 and 1615. It used a clever spring-loaded hammer. It held a piece of sharp flint to strike sparks straight into the pan. The flintlock was faster and weatherproof. It was entirely flame-free. Because of these upgrades, it became Europe's dominant firearm within a few decades. It held this top position for 2 full centuries. It ruled through colonial expansion. It was used in the Napoleonic Wars and the American Revolution. Around the same time, the socket bayonet was invented. This clever device let a soldier fix a sharp blade to his barrel. He could still fire his weapon normally. Because of this, armies no longer needed separate pikemen for protection. Every single soldier could now shoot and stab. This shift was so significant that historians call it the infantry revolution. The long reign of the flintlock finally ended in the early 19th century. It was replaced by the percussion cap. This was an instant ignition charge. It made loose flint and priming powder completely obsolete within a few decades. This invention closed a long chain of mechanical refinement. It was a chain that began 1,000 years earlier. It started with peaceful monks chasing immortality. History remembers the gun as one of humanity's deadliest inventions, but its story actually begins with people chasing the exact opposite. They were looking for a longer, healthier life. That is one of history's truly great ironies. A handful of lonely monks were looking for eternal life. Instead, they stumbled onto a violent, explosive reaction. They nearly burned their own hands off doing it. Everyone after them just solved the next technical problem. Song engineers, Mongol conquerors, and Ottoman soldiers all played a part. Japanese gunsmiths and European craftsmen did too. Each group simply fixed the mistake the last person left behind. In the end, one single failed search for immortality changed the course of human history forever.